Whatever you do, don't make this pumpkin pie. It is not good. Alright, so I made this pie using a new recipe, one that was given to me, and I was assured that it was the best pumpkin pie ever. But it just tastes bland. It doesn't taste bad, it just doesn't taste good either. So if you want to make a pumpkin pie, use this recipe. You can use the directions or the process of the other pie, but just use the ingredients list on this recipe. Sorry about that, but those things happen occasionally when you're using new recipes. I've just cut up a pumpkin, and I have this beautiful pumpkin meat here, and I'm going to cut up into chunks about 1/4 of the pumpkin, and I'm going to cook it like I do sweet potato. I'm going to cut it into about inch and a half square chunks and cover it with water in the Dutch oven and boil it for just a few minutes until it's tender. Then I'll drain the water off and add the rest of the ingredients. Put it in my pie shell. So for right now, I'm cutting up the pumpkin, and I've got a frozen pie shell thawing to cook it in. Now, a lot of people bake their pumpkin and then mash it up and mix it with the other ingredients for a pumpkin pie. But I usually fix mine just like I do sweet potato. I'm only going to make one pie, so I only need enough of the meat to make 2 cups of the pumpkin when it's done. The mashed pumpkin when it's done. Actually, I probably have enough for 2 pies here. If so, I'll freeze 2 cups of it to make another pie later. But for right now, I've got, it's about 1/4 of the pumpkin, the raw pumpkin, medium-sized pumpkin. And I'm going to cover this with water and boil it until it's fork tender. While the pumpkin is cooking, I'm going to go ahead and get my pie crust ready. So I have this frozen pie crust that I'm using a deep dish. I like to use a deep dish even though the recipe doesn't call for it. It just works better because most of the recipes, pie filling recipes that I use, fit better into a deep dish crust than a regular size. So I've got my oven heating for 425 degrees, and I'm going to go ahead and put my pie crust in and cook it for 10 to 15 minutes. I don't want to get it browned because I'm going to cook the pie in it. But if you start with a raw pie crust, when you put your filling in and bake it, a lot of times the bottom part of the crust does not get completely done. It still has that raw taste to it. So I have my deep dish pie shell, and I have it lined with parchment paper and some beans in it to weigh the parchment down. And I'm going to bake it at 425 for about 10 to 15 minutes. I want it to be just about done, but not browned yet. I have the pumpkin is done now, and I drained it through the colander, and now I'm just gonna mash it up. Okay, and now I'm gonna measure 2 cups. And I probably have 2 more cups left here. So what I'm going to do is just freeze that, use it another time. So the pie crust is out of the oven and ready to put the filling in. So I've drained the pumpkin well. And I'm going to add to it 3/4 cup. That's 2 cups of pumpkin. 3/4 cup of sugar, granulated sugar. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I like to use sea salt. Two teaspoons of ground cinnamon. And 1 tablespoon of my granddaughter's homemade vanilla extract, which is fantastic. I have made some myself, but I haven't tried it yet because it hasn't been 2 months and it has to sit for 2 months before it's ready to use. So I'm stirring this up good. And I'm going to add 2 eggs. Our last ingredient is buttermilk. We need 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Alright, we've got all the ingredients in. I'm going to take my little hand mixer, pardon the noise, and make sure it's all mixed up. Okay, and so here is another reason that I use a hand mixer. You see, there are little strings that catch on the beaters of the mixer. I do sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie this way because sometimes that tastes stringy in your pie. So if you mix it up a little bit with a hand mixer, you can get rid of the little stringy things. So that's what I do, and I just throw this away. Alright, so here's our prepared and pre-baked pie shell. And I think I better put it on an old baking sheet so that I don't make a mess with it. Now our pumpkin pie, which is very loose, but it will thicken as it bakes. so the pumpkin pie is in the oven, and it's going to bake at 425 for 10 minutes. Then I'm going to reduce the heat to 325 and let it bake for another 40 minutes. And you'll know it's done when all but the center is set, and the center will still be jiggly. I have the pumpkin pie out of the oven, and it looks good.